Okay, so now I'm going to be reading about Candida, not only being associated with cancer, but probably being what the cancer is. So I'll set this over here, and then I'll be working with the external mic while I can multitask and sunbathe here with my little kitties. Okay. This is page 112 in Simoncini's book, which is called Cancer is a Fungus, A Revolution in Tumor Therapy. Candida is defined as an occasional and opportunistic saprophyte fungus. This official label, which is both appealing and reassuring, in reality says and explains nothing, as it rather underhandedly hides the dangerousness of the disease. The adjectives occasional and opportunistic actually sidetrack the vigilance of the scientific conscience of an individual who is cheated by this soporific tone of the phrase, and by a natural tendency to accept what experts have always said and shared. That is a mistake for two reasons. Firstly, it has been abundantly demonstrated that ideas that are old and widely shared are not necessarily the best. Otherwise, there would have been no scientific progress. Secondly, the term opportunistic does not at all suggest harmlessness. Rather, it suggests a remarkable level of danger, as it highlights an elevated adaptability and polymorphism. This has often been reported, for example, by B. L. Wicks, T. Suzuki, and J. T. Lott. And he footnotes that. A study of FC odds shows how infinite variants of Candida can be formed from identical or similar stocks, even as a function of different geographical areas. This testifies as to how Candida stocks can adapt to any type of variable, not just to the biological ones. It is sufficient to consider that the so-called opportunism of Candida hides in reality such aggressiveness as to make it capable of attacking and colonizing even synthetic materials that are used as substituting prosthesis for internal organs, such as L. N. Shah's, as reported by L. N. Shah's, E-L-L and S-C-H-A-Z. If the opportunistic Candida description means to signify its ability to pass metabolically and structurally from a harmless to a pathogenic state, who could argue about the plausibility of a further transition under certain conditions from a pathogenic to an invasive, that is, tumoral state by means of further stages of differentiated opportunism? Candida is always present in cancer. There are a large number of works that document the constant presence of the mycetes in the tissues of cancer patients, especially in terminal patients. In recent years, we have observed a crescendo of voices addressing this terrible fungus to the point of defining it as the most important and most urgent problem that oncology has to solve. The following figures concerning the coexistence of Candida and cancer have been collected by several authors. R. L. Hopfer, 79%, U. Cobbin, 80%, W. T. Hughes, 91%, T. E. Keene, 97%. The percentages truly observed are truly impressive, especially when considering the difficulty of seeing Candida in the organic materials to be examined. This was also reported by R. S. Escuro, Z. O. Zaraev, and T. J. Walsh. The positive results quoted allow us to confirm that Candida is always present in the tissues of cancer patients. Not only that, but Candida species represent today, according to several scholars, the first cause of morbidity and mortality in patients affected by neoplasias of the hemolymphopoietic system. O. Uzun, UZUN, even analyzed all data from 1974 to 1999 concerning the presence of Candida candidosis in patients and the prognostic factors, including predictable elements of mortality, and came to the conclusion that the global rate of mortality in cancer patients varies between 33% and 75%, and that this is independent of the type of infecting candida. The phenomenon is usually interpreted as a consequence of the weakening and of the exhaustion of the organism because of neoplastic lesions. Conversely, we have to believe that the aggression of candida takes place in the carcinogenic sense after the superficial pathogenic phases, that is, the classic epithelial candidosis, in several stages. We're going to go from A to E. A, brooding in the deep connective tissue in the various organs. B, expansion with evoking of an organic reaction that attempts to encyst the fungal colonies, with the outcome of being the formation of neoplasias. C, growth both in the surrounding tissue and remotely. Then that's metastasis. D, progressive exhaustion of the organism with consequential global organism invasion. This is the stage that is most commonly observed, and that is considered opportunistic. E, exitus. That must be Latin for death. In summary, candida is not a post hoc, but an ante hoc cause. So we all know from our Latin classes when we were young that post means after and ante means before. So candida is not coming after, but it was before. Several works report what has been stated here concerning the causal link between candida and cancer. A. Pedersen and J. Troxtu, the formation of epidermoidal tongue of carcinoma, epidermoidal tongue of carcinoma. K.V. Zhang and O'Grady, oral cavities neoplasias. J.N. Hicks, larynxes neoplasia. E.A. Field and F.R. Wang, lung cancer. P. Joseph, streaked myxoma. A. Rumi et al., esophagus cancer. T. Taguchi, intestinal carcinoma. V. Rahina, Hodgkin's disease. M. Piazzi, Kaposi's disease. A. Manel, pancreas tumor. The considerations and the work cited above testify that candida possesses a great carcinogenic ability and confirms that today it is no longer acceptable to conceive solely a pathogenic role for candida that is consequential to a state of post-tumoral exhaustion. Many amongst the authors we have cited and others that we have not cited admit without hesitation to a direct causal role of the mycetes, I'm not sure how you pronounce that. It means little funguses, in the genesis of cancer. But the error they often make is that of believing candida solely responsible for the production of substances that modify the genes that are proposed to the functionality of the cell. This evaluation prevents them from attributing a direct responsibility to mycetes, and this is the aspect that would finally plow the way to the conclusive discovery of the cause of cancer. Because of the evidence that currently exists, it is not at all logical, therefore, to insist in seeing candida as a microorganism in the twilight zone between pathogenicity and harmlessness. Rather, it should be investigated as the sole, terrible causal generator of neoplasias. And then that next section, tumors are conceptually one phenomenon. Tumors are one phenomenon, but there are many types. Why? According to official views that see genetic alteration at the basis of neoplastic development, it is possible that the alteration can manifest itself in any environment with all possible typological differentiations. From the microbiological point of view, instead, it is always candida that invades various anatomical parts, evoking different reactions as a function of the organs it feeds on. These behaviors are a function of the quantity and quality of the affected tissues. An organ whose connective tissue has been invaded defends itself with a cellular hyperproduction that attempt to encysst the fungal colonies which are trying to completely colonize the organism. It is in this way that the whole histological variety of neoplasias can be explained. The histological variety appears not to be influential in the determination of the cause, which is always and only Candida. It is in this way that during a neoplastic event, some genes can be hyperexpressed, that is, amplified in a defensive effort determined by hyperproduction needs of the tissue. This reaction is normal and not anomalous at all. So remember the gene theory that says, the genes have gone out of control and berserk is saying that it's just sort of an anomalous cell reaction. He's saying this isn't so. That's why he throws out the gene theory. Consider the following example. If we take an inert thorn, for example, that of a sea urchin, and we inoculate it first in the skin, then in the bronchi, the bone, brain, and other body areas, we evoke an immune response of a cellular type tending to encyst the thorn, that is, to form some kind of cocoon in which to enclose it. By the same token, the immune system interprets fungal colonies beyond a certain dimension as extraneous foreign bodies, stimulating an encystment reaction that is produced with the type of cells of the invaded tissue. The thorn or the fungus can therefore cause, according to the case, an epithelioma, an adenocarcinoma, an osteosarcoma, a glioblastoma, and so on. In the first moments of the invasion, the organism is able to send mature cells to contain the proliferating fungi. This is the phenomenon of a differentiated tumor. As the colonies become more powerful and the tissues are exhausted, cells become more and more immature up to anaplasia. Furthermore, the ratio between differentiated tissues and connective tissue existing in an organ determines the reaction capability and thus the degree of malignancy of a neoplasia. The fewer noble cells there are, the more malignant and invasive the tumor becomes. So, on the one hand, we have noble tissue which cannot be attacked, that is, muscles and nerves. See, cancer doesn't go into the muscles and nerves. On the other hand, the simple connective tissues. Let me read that again. So, on the one hand, we have noble tissues which cannot be attacked, muscles and nerves, and on the other, the simple connective tissue, which can. The glandular tissue, which is halfway between these two elements, just because it is provided with that complex structure that confers to it a certain ability of encysting the fungi, can oppose their invasion by producing the phenomenon of the benign tumor. For example, if we consider the thyroid, we can see how in this gland neoformations can take any gradation of malignancy, even when they possess benign histological characteristics, as is the case for capsulated follicular carcinoma, long ago called metastasizing benign adenoma. This can happen because the concept of a benign tumor does not have an absolute value. In this case, even if it is true that fungal cells cannot normally go through the differentiated cells barrier, that does not mean that under particular conditions they cannot be successful. It is for this reason that such neoformations are considered odd in oncology. But such oddities can be easily explained with the interpretation key of fungal infection. When the glandular tissues is exhausted, the benign tumor becomes a malignant one. For all intents and purposes, it is always the same candida attacking different tissues, each time adapting itself to the type of environment it finds. The specifications usually assigned to the various candidas, Candida albicans, cruceae, parapsilosis, glabrata, tropicalis, and others, underestimate the fact that they all come from one single progenitor, which, when it genetically mutates to attack the host, transforms itself into this or that stock. R.L. Hopfler, for example, found no less than 4 different Candida species in the post-mortem cultures of a leukemia patient. N. Aksoyakan demonstrated that 7 different stocks of Candida actually have the same antigenic structure. F.C. Odds reports how the same Candida stock can colonize different anatomical areas at different times. J. Helstein has found the common clonal origin in Candida albicans for both commensal and pathogenic stocks. Now, here's the section. It's important. Candida shows the same genetic structure as cancer. Paradoxically, the title of this section describes something that is so relevant it can demonstrate how Candida can actually be the cancer. But that is not even taken into consideration. By official thinking. Let me read that again. It's so important. Paradoxically, the title of this section, which is Candida shows the same genetic structure as cancer. So that title describes something that is so relevant it can demonstrate how Candida can actually be the cancer, but that is not even taken into consideration by official thinking. That it can be the cancer is not even taken into consideration. The authors cited below, although they confirm the genetic identity, report the issue in a sterile, descriptive way. G.A. Werner reports to have found the homologous sequences in DNA samples extracted from Candida glabrata, Candida parapsilopsis, and from cells of biopsy material taken from squamous cell carcinoma of upper airways. K. Yasumoto and K. Kawamoto demonstrate how the specific monoclonal antibody directed against the C cytochrome of Candida krusei also reacts in the presence of a cytoplasmic fraction of cells of lung cancer. G. Schwartzy suggests utilizing specific antibodies against Candida in the diagnosis of malignant melanoma. E. H. Robinette Jr. describes a remarkable resistance to the inoculation of lethal doses of Candida in mice into which a Lewis pulmonary carcinoma or carcinoma of other anatomical areas was previously implanted. A. Cassoni and J. B. Weinberg highlight a significant anti-tumoral response in mice that have been inoculated with materials from the cellular wall of Candida albicans. There is, therefore, beyond interpretations that are more or less reductive, a high degree of relationship between Candida and tumoral tissues. If we then consider the endless phenotypical variability of the mycete, together with the extreme difficulty in finding and classifying the various existing stock, it seems legitimate to assume the existence of a deep genetic relationship between cancer and Candida in its various differentiations, or at least to try to understand what the deep link is between these two morbid entities. And the next section is going to be the phenomenon of metastasis. According to the official viewpoints, metastasis is the development of some malignant cell which, after escaping from the primary location of the cancer, migrates to another anatomical area. From the microbiological point of view, instead, although it indeed develops from cells escaping from the original cancer, the base unit is not a cell gone crazy, but an infective fungal cell that has managed to colonize another organ. To create an analogy, think of a pulmonary tuberculosis that through time produces localization in the kidney and the bones, the meningitis, or something else. Furthermore, the opportunity and the basis of metastasis are a function of the more or less healthy condition of the organs and of the tissues, which can mount a more or less effective resistance to counter the rooting of new colonies. Local spreading aside, a primary tumor can be spread through 1. It's not 1, 2, it's just a bullet. Local spreading aside, a primary tumor can spread through absence of metastasis, when other organs, if healthy, are provided with an elevated reactive ability, or formation of metastasis, where an organ has cellular or tissue structures that are weakened, or formation of multiple metastases in multiple locations, when the whole organism is dying and all organs become vulnerable to attack. The possibility of metastasization depends not only on the energetic condition of the various tissues and organs, but also on Candida's ability to metabolically adapt itself to different microenvironmental situations. This eventually, as it favors the spreading of the mycete, accentuates the weakening of the tissues where a process of ongoing and steady demolition of the host's reactive abilities are rooted ex novo. And this goes on until the host surrenders. Dr. Talk for Die. In this context, it becomes clear how any intervention or treatment that has a certain degree of potential to cause damage to the tissues can turn out to be extremely dangerous, because it is in this way that the spreading of the metastasis is facilitated. Surgery, chemotherapy, and radiotherapy, therefore, can be among the main causes of metastasization, as they always establish such tissue suffering as to predispose various organs to tumoral invasion, and this is actually and often reported by many scholars, and he footnotes that. The thesis of the crazy cell that reproduces itself in various areas of the organism seems therefore far less logical than the infectious model, especially when we consider that the premises upon which genetic theory is based are totally random. It is worth highlighting the emblematic phrase printed in the main text of Italian Oncology, that of Bonadonna and Rubistelli mentioned before. Quote, "A tumor is constituted by different populations from the kinetic point of view. The proliferating cells are often a minority. In solid tumors, instead, the exponential growth rate takes place only in the initial phase of the life of the tumor." End quote. Simoncini goes on, "What else do we want? To conclude, on the basis of the argument put forward, it is therefore legitimate to state that Candida is the etiological cause of cancer. In fact, it turns out that, bullet, cancer is always present in patients affected by neoplasia, bullet. It can produce metastases, bullet. It has a genetic patrimony that can be overlapped with that of tumor, bullet. It can be utilized for an early detection of cancer, bullet. It can invade all types of tissues and organs, bullet. It has unlimited aggressiveness and adaptability, bullet. It produces symptomological trend that can be overlapped with that of neoplasias, final bullet. It possesses the demonstrated ability to promote neoplastic degeneration. What further confirmations do we need? Candida is truly the cancer, and it must be fought from this standpoint in all its pathogenic variants." The following section, I'll read it today, is Psoriasis is Like Cancer, and this is from the 3rd chapter of Cancer is a Fungus, and the name of this 3rd chapter was I looked at the section. This is about the world of the fungi. And Candida, a New Theory of Cancer. I read quite a few. That starts on page 91, and I started reading from page 112. So you should all go out and get this book. Cancer is a Fungus by Simoncini. And you go to cancerfungus.com. And you can learn more about this fascinating topic. And I always point out that very loving picture that he has on the front, showing 2 hands coming from the left as you're looking at it to the patient's hands, 1 hand on the right. And that's when people are really sick and really hurting and they're really reaching out. And there's something really wonderful when you respond to that vulnerability of somebody who's sick and who's in pain. And that is what love is about. And I think that's the basis of what true healing is. And it takes a lot of love right now for those that are really concerned about this. It's not to say that those who are stuck in the institutions and playing, the social acceptance game, keeping their kids in college and so on, and doctors, people are afraid to step out of the system. But sooner or later, there have to be a few people that do. And when these people do step up, they should be supported. And I think that's the way you turn the tide. And that's why I'm telling some people that the mindset itself of traditional therapy or socially accepted therapy for cancer, which he explained, it has no logical basis or sense. It's a fungus itself. And so you have to deal very carefully and cautiously when you're dealing with this type of mindset. Otherwise, you create such a strong reaction. And then that aspect where he said this is not about the laying on of hands, or I don't know what other phrase he used, but the laying on of hands and that type of healing has to do with recognizing authority, and that as part of a happy society or a well-ordered society, you do your job if you're not a doctor, you're not a scientist, by, doing the commerce and bringing in the milk and the bread, and you're trusting that those who have the time and the leisure to study things are doing their job. But if they're not doing their job, then the faith that you have in them is not merited. But there's nothing wrong with trusting a doctor. And so I always say, give people the benefit of the doubt. They're trying to do the right thing. They're just misinformed themselves, and then once the correct information comes in, people are sort of shocked. Doctors would be shocked and horrified because they'd go, well, why did I never find this out in medical school? And so it means that there's a big shift that's going to happen. And this is often what is talked about in Indian tradition, which is dharma. You do your dharma, your role, even if it seems lesser in merit than somebody who's more important, because if you do your role, then the one who's more important, who has bigger temptations to succumb to corruption and to cover up, because again, he was citing original research, not the papers that were writing up the interpretation of these different scientists who were observing the different Candida colonies and so on. He was the people who are writing them up have a big temptation to write it up in a certain way that whoever's supporting their institutions, they want to make sure they're still funded. And a lot of people grow very frightened when they see homelessness. They don't want to be part of it. And so homelessness and the fear of the economy that we have right now is striking terror into the hearts of everyone, not just those who are poor, but even those who are rich are in a certain way even less capable of handling the thought of poverty, and so they cheat. And this is the result. We don't really find out that cancer is curable.